2035.
Can you give us some examples of the terrible conditions for ordinary citizens in Romania?
Well, I would start from basic life. Fundamental things that you find very easy in any other part of the world, like food. Basic necessities, you would have to spend like half of your day to stay in the line. And I think there is a double strategy there. The economical reason. You can't find food because everything is exported. On the other hand, they want you to spend so much time in the line so you don't have time for other things that would bother them. Not to have time to read, to go to the movies, to talk to your friends, to discuss what's going on. And that's very smart. Then the medical assistant, which is so highly acclaimed back there, it's practically non-existent if you don't have money. If you're an ordinary person going into a hospital, nobody would bother to look at you except for a long wait, or if you are in a very, very critical condition, they would give you the basic help, nothing beyond that. If you want something extra, a little bit of attention, even if you are critically ill, you have to pay money to everybody. There are reasons for that. Doctors are paid probably just a couple of dollars, but also you have to have treatment that they can't get unless they pay somebody else.
Is there a shortage?
Excuse me, will you cut, please? Yep.
Is there a shortage of basic medical supplies?
Medical supplies are now, I would say, practically non-existent. There isn't a supply. Whatever is being produced is being used, and there is very little produced out of raw material shortage and cuttings in all kinds of fabrication processes. Even, again, basic, fundamental things like aspirin and things that people would take for a normal cold are very hard to get. That's why you have to pay everybody, the pharmacist, the doctor, people who'd have some relations someplace and some possibility to give you those basic things. If you're seriously ill, if you have diabetes, I can tell you because I do have diabetes, insulin is a problem. You can only get the insulin that they produce there, and insulin is a basic thing for a diabetic. If you want something extra, then you could simply die.
What is the general atmosphere of life like? I mean,
life is, I would say, dark. There's no other way. We have a very famous novel in Romanian literature. It's Under the Clouds. Everything is going on under a very dark atmosphere. Romanian people is a very funny people. They laugh a lot. They want to make fun of their own lives. I don't think they are capable to do that anymore. They have sort of a morbid sense of humor being introduced into themselves, and that's a shame. That changes the basic side of their culture. Everything is somber, everything is blackened. It's like under a state of siege, and everybody's scared. You don't have time to do your own life. You have to stay in the line for your food. You have to stay in the line to get to the bus, to get to work. At work, you can't laugh at all. There's no reason to. You come back, and then the only bosses in this life would be your family life. Now, the tragic part of it is what's going on within a family, the innermost cell of our lives. People get scared to even talk to themselves, and especially with their children. And parents are scared to talk about their problems in front of their children. They are somehow controlling themselves, and that's not a self-control. That's a control imposed by the security, by everybody outside your own family. You can't educate your own child the way you want. If you want your child to know that you are not satisfied, you want him to be able to judge you. But you can't. You have to wait when he goes to sleep. You have to soften your voice. Not only, you're not scared of your neighbors, you're scared of your own child, and that's terrifying. And there's nothing you can do, because the child, when he goes to school, his teacher would say, your parents are wrong, in an indirect sort of way. So the child believes that Mr. Shochezko is the real father.
what happens to women who want abortions in Romania?
Another part of this family life is the fact that you can't even schedule the time when you want to have a child. it's a way like somebody is controlling when you have to have love. It's not only that period of months when you want to have love or not. It's that period in the socialist time when you have to have children. Women are told first on a very sensitive level that you have to be human, you have to take care of the human race. The most important role in a woman's life is that she is a mother, and you would have such a satisfaction to have a child, and not only one, you would have to have as many as you can, because, and now comes the other side of the problem, because the socialist country needs those people. We need a lot of young, constructive people who'd go out there in the field to take care of the crop, to build tractors.
Can you talk a little to us about Elena Shochezko? You work for her as an interpreter. Could you just tell us some of the stories that you came across?
Talking about family life, we can go to the top of the family life, which is Mr. Shochezko and his wife. And having lived in that country for about 30 years, I can tell you that Mr. Shochezko is not at all loved there. But compared to him, Mrs. Shochezko is hated. They would choose any day him as against her. She's considered a very vicious person, and I wouldn't blame them for picturing her this way. I couldn't tell you a lot of details about their personal lives because there's no way I can get there. But I can tell you some details of what's going on a personal relationship in a very usual work day.
2037.
As an interpreter, I can give you some details of how I was chosen for the job. Honestly, I don't think my moral qualities or my interpreter qualities were the most important factors. I was chosen because I looked a lot plain than other women in the same surroundings. She is known to have a fear of having to stay in the same room with nice-looking, elegant women. And I was trained before any interview of how I was supposed to be dressed. I was told not to wear any makeup and to be as plain as possible, not poorly dressed because that would probably impress her sensitivity in a wrong way, but to be decent, to wear maybe a lace collar or something like that, and not to laugh, not to smile. And then I was trained to be the actual interpreter. At first, it was very funny and unbelievable for me because I was sure that everybody in the room would realize what was going on. Then everybody was as quiet as I was, so I went ahead and did what I was supposed to do. And that was a sort of a scenario, very well acted and enforced by people that knew Mrs. Shochezko quite well. The visitors were asking questions naturally, and I was supposed to translate the questions first. I was told never to repeat what Mrs. Shochezko would say offhand. After I translated the question, Mrs. Shochezko would repeat the question in Romanian. And then the staff would start preparing the answer, and somebody courageous enough would give the final answer. Then Mrs. Shochezko would take it over like a ball and would repeat the same question in Romanian. At that point, I was supposed to start translating, but I was told that I was not supposed to start to base my translation on what she was saying. God forbid she might forget something that the other person said before. Then I would do the normal translation. And again, I'm reinforcing the fact I find it unbelievable that important scientists, people with a high degree of education, would not realize what was going on there. I'm sure they did.
What was the purpose of this charade?
I would say the only thing that anybody would think is that an academician is supposed to know a lot of things about normal chemical things that even I started to know after 3 years of working in that surrounding. She had no idea of what's going on. I think she didn't even know the basic formula in chemistry. It sounds childish, but that's the truth. So they wanted to finish up the halo that surrounded her head as a scientist, as a very, very important, renowned and famous scientist all over the world.
Was she rather vicious? Was there examples of her being vindictive?
She wasn't vicious to me directly. She was very upset if I would soften my voice. As you probably hear, I have a very, very soft voice, and she was upset about that. But vindictive, I know she was. She would pick up people she didn't like for reasons I'm not aware of, and I don't think she is. She would just pick somebody she didn't like, and she would lay him off. And she would make a big thing out of that, his whole family. Even if that person was good in his job, she wouldn't care about that. Even that would mean that we would have to work 10 years to get another person in his place.
What sort of things would offend her, upset her?
You would know what kind of things would upset her. Anything would be upsetting today, and tomorrow maybe it would be flattering. The bathing things would be, as I said before, a nice-looking woman, a very...
Can we do that again? Just do that again. Say it again, Michael.
What sort of things would upset her?
You would know what kind of things would upset her. Maybe something that upsets her today would be flattering for her tomorrow. But as I said before, she was upset about a nice-looking woman, an elegant woman in the same room. She would upset if somebody not paying enough attention to her charms and to her intelligence and to her spirits. She would be upset if somebody would try to step a little bit ahead of her in any circumstance, as a woman, as a scientist. Everybody should keep their own positions.
Could you tell us something about the contemporary history course at university?
Yes, when I was in the 4th year in the university, and like everybody else, I was ready to prepare for the final exams. We were told that we would have a compulsory course in Romanian history. Well, it wasn't the best idea, but we wouldn't object at first because we took quite a lot of courses in Romanian history. We were very familiar with it. We knew the years of the battles and the important figures. But all of a sudden, Romanian history was actually contemporary history of the party and the Socialist Republic. And not only that, the actual history was the biographical data of Mr. Shochezko, the important dates of his speeches and the important messages that his speeches would give us to the whole world. The thing is that if he has a message, I think that's only one, and it's being transmitted all over his speeches, repeated in different ways by very qualified literary people. But that's very difficult for students to remember exactly what was said in 1972, except for the fact that he promoted the multilaterally developed socialist country. We didn't know anything else, so we had to study in the 4th year what was going on in 1972 in an agricultural committee meeting, and it was very, very upsetting for a 4th year student.
2038.
Tell us about the contemporary history course in university.
When I was in the 4th year in university, we were told that we are supposed to take a compulsory class in Romanian history. And as we found out, it wasn't the normal course that we took several times. It was the history of Romanian society after 1960, which was actually the biography of Mr. Shochezko. We were supposed to actually memorize what he was talking about with several occasions. And actually what he was talking about was the same thing, changed by highly sophisticated people to make it look different.
More literary?
Yes. Oh.
How reliable are Romanian statistics? Tell us about how you invented them and why.
Romanian statistics are a very innovative thing. If you were talking about comics and funny stories, it was like a picnic. We were told that Monday we were supposed to start working on the statistics, so everybody would pull out the registers and the statistics from the previous year, and then we'd start working from there on, with the help of everybody in the ministry and under the guidance of the security guards, of course, because they would bring out the files, the previous files. And we were told the actual figures that the Romanian economy flourished with for the past year. I'm only talking about chemistry right now. In a certain field, the production was increased 12%, so we would take the previous year's figures and increase them 12%. Or if Mr. Shochezko or Mrs. Shochezko didn't like certain people in a certain area, we were supposed to give the negatives towards that, focus them towards that particular. Something very important is that in a socialist country there are no negative things. If it's negative, it means that it didn't flourish as it was supposed to. And the fault is not the socialist economy, of course. Everything is planned, but the human factor gets involved. So that's to be blamed.
Can you tell us something about the terrible conditions of ordinary life?
I could tell you things not about life at a very high level, but what's going on in an ordinary life, about things that you need every day, like food, a basic thing, and medical help. Food is a real problem back there. Not only that it doesn't exist, but whatever is, you have to wait and struggle to get. You would have to spend your time in a very, very long queue or very long line. And that is, I think, a very smart thing that the government invented. Not only that, out of economic reasons, you couldn't find the food because it was exported or it was nicely planned. But also spending so much time in a line implies that your short time is cut shorter. You don't have time to read a book, to watch TV, to get with your friends, to talk about what's going on in your ordinary life. Your family life is almost non-existent. Everybody's out there trying to get oranges and eggs. And talking about eggs, I remember something that now from here seems funny, but it wasn't funny back there. In a ministry, which is one of the highest level of work back there, the people that work there were ministers and their secretaries and all kinds of directors that ordinary people in the street would look upon as a very sophisticated strata in our society.
Tell us the egg story.
I used to work in the Ministry of Chemistry, and one day we were told that eggs were being brought in the restaurant downstairs. So everybody dashed out, and the head of the line was, of course, the Ministry of Chemistry himself.
Tell us how you used to invent statistics.
One day the security guards would come and tell us that Monday we were supposed to work on the statistics. So we would have a picnic, we would all go in an office, and the security guards would pull out the register from the previous year, and then we would start working on the statistics, increasing a certain product by 12% or increasing another product that Mr. Shochezko didn't like by less than 12%.
How present are security guards, the securitati, in everyday life?
If you want to picture Romanian life, you should always have like the raisonneur in the traditional French novels. There's always an extra person there, which is the security guard. He is present even in the wards where women have their abortions, or even getting involved directly in the process.
Are there lots of security guards wherever you work?
The number of security guards is, I would say, increasingly and seriously threatening. I don't know the exact numbers, but you suspect even your closest friends that might work for the security guards. There are the actual security guards that you know of and that you fear in the open, and also the hidden ones that you have no idea, and they are there helping the actual ones.
Thank you very much.
Marker? 2041.
What is the psychological and emotional effect on people of the Shochezko regime?
Oh, I didn't get your okay. Life in Romania has become something ruled by fear, by a very, very deep emotional fear, which comes out of the fact that you're surrounded by a shortage of food. You don't know if tomorrow you can have something to give your children, if you can have milk for them, if tomorrow you can have medicine for yourself or for your old father and mother. When I used to live there, I would say that Romanian people will have a limit of what they would accept when they touch food. They would go ahead and make laugh if they attack the newspapers, music, but if they touch their food, food is an essential part in their life. And if they touch that, then they would revolt. They don't have the courage to do that, and that increases fear.
Do the people feel that they might actually be arrested if they spoke about the Shochezkos in a critical way, for example? How afraid are they of actually coming up against the security police themselves on a daily basis?
Even in your family life, you start to feel frightened to even mention names that might be powerful. You have to soften, lower your voice if you mention his name. You can't discuss things freely with your wife, especially with your kids. The famous Falcons would go to school and they would repeat what they heard from their parents, and that would jeopardize you and your children too.
What do people feel about the Shochezkos and their cult of personality around them?
I don't know how that would be taken in a different part of the world, but over there I would say it was possible because people didn't take him seriously at the beginning for different reasons. My father's generation would always hope that the Americans would come and save us. On a basic everybody in the country would say this is not true because it's so funny, it's so ridiculous. Nobody would take him seriously because it's so open. And actually, he took himself seriously.
Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. 2042.
Right.
Okay.
Tell us about what happened to some of the scientific translations you made.
I was supposed to help the people in the ministry translate and publicize their original works. And what I was actually doing, I was taking some reviews published somewhere in England or in America and translate them, or even in Spain. I remember I was supposed to take a course to translate something in Spanish. Things that were published and recorded someplace else were taken as original works.
Can you tell us about how the statistics in your ministry were invented?
One day the security guards would come and let us know that, let's say, next Monday we're supposed to work on the Romanian statistics for chemistry to be presented to Mr. Shochezko on a specific date. And we would go, all of us, in one office. The security guards were watching over, bringing over the statistics from the previous year. We'll take those and start working on the actual year statistics, increasing certain figures by, let's say, 12% if things were going brilliant. And if they weren't going so brilliant, we would increase them by 11% or 6%.
And would they sometimes use these forged statistics to punish people who weren't in favour?
Statistics were both illustrative and punishing. They were supposed to illustrate the fact that socialist economy never fails, and to punish people that implied that the human factor would have a negative effect on the brilliant socialist ideas.
So what kind of people were being punished?
People that the Shochezko family wouldn't agree with were laid off by help of these statistics. If the production was increased not by 12 but by 6, that was a bad sign, and everybody knew that next day a certain person won't have the same job in the ministry, even if he was qualified and good for that.
2043. Okay.
How much propaganda is there glorifying the Shochezkos in Romania?
There isn't any newspaper, any TV news that wouldn't speak about Mr. Shochezko at the maximum length of time possible. Any news magazine that you would open in Romania would talk about Mr. Shochezko primarily. Any book that you would open and it's written in these last years would have to mention Mr. Shochezko.
Keep going.
And what about cinemas and films?
The same thing with films being produced. They would have to glorify in a direct or indirect way the role of the president in the actual life.
And what about propaganda for Eleanor? Is there propaganda for her now?
In the most recent years, Mr. Shochezko, unfortunately for him, had to share his glory with his wife. Now there isn't only a father, there is a mother for the country. So there are 2 pictures of him, there must be 2 pictures of her in the same newspaper. If his name is being mentioned with his title, of course she has to be mentioned with the list of titles that she accumulated over the years.
And in schools, are children told about them too?
Children are being told the good things that Mr. and Mrs. Shochezko have done for them and for all of us during the past years. And I wouldn't be surprised if they would start of initiating a sort of a prayer to start the day with for the glory of our leaders.